State of emergency declared in Rivers State. The Rivers State governor suspended for 6 months. An initial 6 months. Get that correctly. An initial 6 months. All right. So it could go further, more than 6 months. And the political crisis in Rivers State continues to make the headlines, and it took that twist yesterday. All right, so let's discuss the implications and the meanings on the everything of that is happening in Rivers State. The declaration or the proclamation, made by the president, President Bola Tinubu, as regards the Rivers State political crisis. We have our political analyst who is here to break everything down, and the implications of what the proclamation made by the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So let's get the implications of the declaration made by the president, and what it means for Rivers people and democracy in Nigeria.
Now, first of all, more seriously, the first implication is that there is gross abuse of power in Nigeria, not just Rivers State. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, had been grossly undermined, and its operators, starting with the president in this circumstance, has shown unforgivable disregard and disrespect to the provisions of the Constitution. And it confirms when somebody argued long ago that the preamble told a lie against itself, that we, the people of Nigeria, did not give to ourselves this Constitution. And down to Rivers State in question, it's disappointing, very undemocratic, unconstitutional for the president to have done so. And that we need to remind Nigerians that if this is allowed to sustain, they must realize and understand that suffering anywhere is suffering everywhere. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Insecurity anywhere is insecurity everywhere. So nobody should go back sleeping and clapping, so thank God Rivers people are suffering. It's not correct. It's a trend. It's developing. It's more like the way elections, off-cycle elections, are conducted in recent past. And we saw scribes of the present party APC making remarks, very disparaging remarks of what they did in XYZ state to be done elsewhere. So the same thing now, that if the president will act in an unconstitutional manner in declaring his emergency in Rivers State, that is not necessary. So it means that the part of the implication would be, if it is not challenged and gotten right, it means that tomorrow nobody knows.
Yeah, when you talk about, when you say unconstitutional, yes, what do you mean by that in this context?
If you go by the section he quoted in his nationwide broadcast, you will discover so much of deficiencies in his claims. First, you look at the opening lines of that section that talks about him proclaiming it, and gets the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Rep, whom is expected to go back, convey the House, and have deliberations on the request the president had made. In this case, yesterday we were told that it was about 3 p.m. he invited them. And just the next couple of minutes,
that's the Senate President,
the Senate President,
and the Speaker of the House of
and
Reps.
3 fellows. And that other line of the Constitution that talks about they in turn will have to convene the House, deliberate, debate, consider that request, and decide if the president request is necessary in the circumstance. That was not observed nor adhered to. He just left that meeting and came to hold a nationwide broadcast. That was more like a reminder of a military junta. We had the head of state come say, my fellow Nigerians, and everybody will be taken aback. The constitution is suspended. It is not different.
So what you're saying is that an agreement with the Speaker and the Senate President are not enough.
It's not sufficient.
It is not sufficient.
That is procedural. That's just one. I don't want to go into. If you go down the paragraphs there, the conditions that are spelled out that may even necessitate, which is what the House is expected to consider. If you take into account the conditions in Rivers State, they are even far below. They've not met those constitutional conditions. And there is something called constitutionalism in a representative system. What does it mean? The ability for departments, governments, authorities, agencies to carry out their operations in conformity with provisions of the constitution. That's what they call constitutionalism in a constitutional democracy. And go check crises all over, unstable unrest, social unrest, instability elsewhere. It is the failure to observe constitutionalism that has led to breakdown of land and insurrection and social instability in other societies. So again, I have great worry and concern that President Tinubu couldn't have doubled as ECOWAS chairman. And you had the recent past, we all are witnesses, under his watch as ECOWAS chairman, 3 West African sub-region states had left the ECOWAS. One in question in point is Niger here. It was these same issues. In fact, what has happened in Rivers is still happening was far worse than we saw a President Tinubu as ECOWAS chairman demonstrated so much anger that why will the military boys truncate a democratic institution in Niger Republic? And if you go quickly, as I'm speaking like that, just go quickly check the conditions there. Yet he was met with a restraint. Say no, you can't come in with a military might. So if he respected that and is preaching that it's not correct for countries, regardless the intolerance of democratic tussles and struggles, political, it's not right for the military to hurriedly or hastily truncate the democratic. Nigerians should ask the question, and the world leaders, why? What is the haste? The conditions in Rivers State has not met those necessary conditions where you require. Secondly, you abuse the process. You don't have regard for the constitutional processes. Now, if you go back and listen to his broadcast, he just said, "Oh, a pipeline was busted. The Governor Fubara did not observe." After the Supreme Court judgment, would President Tinubu feign ignorance not to hear? This is yesterday was 18th. The Supreme Court judgment was 28th February. So we've had over 2 weeks and more. And efforts have been on. There has been back and forth between the two arms, the Rivers State House of Assembly and Governor Fubara. As a responsible and a considerate president who is interested in applying, administrative solution, he has the capacity. This energy he used in reading this thing and evoking that section. What was difficult to have put a call to the governor? Regardless, let's forgive the fact that the governor made a mistake not reaching out to him. That, look, Your Excellency, sir, I made efforts to reach out to this young man in complying with the Supreme Court judgment. This is what I'm met with. I'm met with resistance. Owing to poor, they claim I didn't communicate. Please, can you assist me? Tell them that I am ready to present the budget. Will heaven fall? What will it take away from the president? And I am sure it's not something the president will fail. It's all about the dailies. The president reads the dailies. So if he didn't do that, if he cannot afford to feign ignorance. Now, just last day, his minister, you have over 42 ministers in federal cabinet. How could a president who double ECOWAS chairman and frowns at violence in other democratic West African societies tolerate a minister who is very desperate and wants to assert himself functioning in 2 roles? First, he wants to have control in Rivers State, also have control as a function as FC minister. There is no such record. And how would they have tolerated that? That also is a violation of human rights, of a democratic values. Now, sometime a U.S. scribe, a lecturer in one of the institutions in the U.S., wrote an article sometime that Nigeria is a failed state. Everybody was calling for his neck. When I read this article, one of the paragraphs which I enjoy citing, he concluded by saying, how do you know failed states? They are violent. And that is part of the implication. This is a violent approach by a civilian president.
All right. One question that keeps coming to the minds of people is that does the president have the power, the sole power to suspend an elected governor?
He doesn't like you. The word soul is not there. The constitution did not contemplate sole power. That's why that line of Section 0 said he will need to communicate to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Reps, whom in turn will have to convey their various houses and consider, debate his request.
But in that section,
yesterday,
before you go ahead, in that section, is it defined? Is it well defined and pronounced that in declaration of state of emergency that the president has the power, can suspend?
Never. Whatever consequence, he will have to wait and see the outcome of the consideration of the House of Assembly, the National Assembly rather. He will have to wait. That's why the Constitution contemplates not to allow absolute power, like Lord Acton would argue, one of the social vets, to say, look, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So to avoid that, that's why you have the three arms checks and balances. So he couldn't have solely decide. He was not in a constitutional position to say he alone can ascertain and confirm that his actions are due. So you needed the other arms to review it. So the use of the expression suspend is not there, because that is part of what many Nigerians had faulted. And it's an impeachable offense, because if the president commits infractions of the conscience, it's impeachable. So now, unfortunately, it's after the deed had been done, we hear that the Assembly is trying to gun. What would they debate when the substance is already carried out? So, of course, they still have the power to reverse it. They have the power. The National Assembly have the power to nullify the excesses of the president. So, the greatest danger here is that there is a growing trend of unforgivable abuse of power, disregard for the rule of law. He, in one breath, a while ago, was encouraging the Rivers State Governor Fubara to keep to the rule of law. Like I pointed out in our previous edition, rule of law is not only following others' judgments from the conventional courts. It's more seen in the day-to-day administrative practice between arms of government, organs of government, agents of government, between governments and individuals. The manner in which the ability to adhere and conform with regulatory processes and values. It's where you can look at rule of law. For example, now that section says the speaker will have to convey. The ability for the president to patiently wait and see the outcome of their conversation. He's exercising the rule of law. He's demonstrating the observance of the rule of law. So failure to do that means that he doesn't believe in the rule of law, which he has done.
All right. In summary, what's the way forward for Rivers people? Where do they come in this circumstance?
Unfortunately, again, if you look at that nationwide broadcast, I was curious to wonder that, part of the Supreme Court judgment was to withhold Rivers State allocations. Now you brought in a sole administrator. I was wondering, where would this guy get the money, the funds to run the state? There was no mention. Secondly, he just said an initial 6 months. And if you look at the concluding line of that broadcast, he did not tell us what will be the consequences, assuming situations remain the way they are after 6 months. And recall again that when you say the role of Liverpool, two things will be happening. First, you recall that the case by Labour Party at the Federal High Court was supposed, though thank God he said the order does not affect the judiciary. So probably that can go on 16th of April. Then you have the LGA elections planned for August 9. If you count 6 months from now, you'll be looking at September. So that's already overtaken. So right now, the people of Rivers State appear not to, for the next 6 months, they will not be exercising their democratic rights. They cannot have conversations. They can't hold anybody accountable. They can't hold, except for mayors who continue conversations like this, trying to deepen the conversation and raise awareness. But funds are not forthcoming. Probably the sole administrator will just continue to rely on what is generated internally. But that is also a source of worry. Will the sole administrator just depend on what is internally generated? I'm surprised the president mentioned that. Then funny enough, which is very, very ugly, he has succeeded in making, by that proclamation now, Rivers State now will be an extension of the Federal Executive Council, which is an aberration. A component, an entity, a component of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which also reminds or resonates that age-long argument to say, have we really sat down to debate our federalism? Because if you go back just by the Oxford definition, it means that the component states are independent. Now, that principle of independence have been violated because it don't necessarily need any special constitution. Just by the mere fact that we are a federal structure, the center has no legal authority, to subsume the subnational. So if you're saying that the sole administrator shouldn't make any law, he can just come up with administrative regulations, but that it will be subject to what you, the Federal Executive, Council. So now, as big as Rivers State is now an extension of the Federal Capital, the Federal Executive Council. That's exactly the unfortunate and sad reality we are faced with.